Hello, boys and girls. Welcome to another episode of Rimshots with Sean. I have a treat. This man probably needs no introduction in these parts, but we're going to do it anyway. Mr. Rik Emmett, how are you, sir?
I'm good, Sean.
Lay it on the line. And so why don't you give our viewers the total title, because it's what a read, but how long has it been since it came out?
Came out sort of, they started accepting pre-orders back in the summer, but the actual release date was sort of October 11th, something like that, street date. And the printer was actually early in delivering the product. So I was, autographing copies in the first week of October. The subtitle is A Backstage Pass to Rockstar Adventure, Conflict, and Triumph. So does that not sound like a subtitle cooked by a marketing department? I think so, but whatever.
Well, so when I read the book, there's a couple things. So I don't know why I thought you were from Mississauga, but you mentioned and you named the addresses of where you grew up. And I think one of them was 533 Dufferin Street, which was right around the corner where I used to spend a lot of time when I lived in Toronto, because I had a friend that lived in that neighborhood. I knew the area right away, so that was pretty cool. But you're a Toronto boy, born and bred.
Yeah, the west end of the city. And 530 Dufferin Street was where we rented a house for a couple of years when I first joined Triumph, and my girlfriend and I moved out and lived with my best friend, who was a French horn player, and he was still in university at the time. That was the beginnings of things back down there, and always been a West End Toronto boy. But sort of as our personal wealth accumulated, we started gravitating further and further west. So we were in Etobicoke, then my wife and I moved up, bought a house in Mississauga. When the Just a Game album really kind of hit, and we started making good money, we bought a house there, raised our kids there, and then when we downsized, we went even further west, and now I live in Burlington, Ontario.
Great part of the world. And I want to share this with you. You may have heard it before, I don't know. I have an opportunity to interview an awful lot of people in the United States. So I've interviewed Eric Martin from Mr. Big, by a guy by the name of Pete Evick, who was Brent Michaels' musical director. When I ask them what they know about Canadian music, they obviously say Rush, Triumph, and April Wine all the time. And those are the only ones that they really know. Do you find that surprising?
This kind of thing depends on what age of people that you're talking to, right? If they were a little bit older, they might be going, and plus, the circles that you travel in, right? So people might be naming the Guess Who and Bachman Turner Overdrive if they were a little older. And then, if you're a little younger, people might be going, Bryan Adams. Or if they were from a different, stylistic kind of bent, they would go, Celine Dion, like that. Like the whole thing about being Canadian is, I think Americans kind of look at it as, you're from Alaska, aren't you? You're from that weird place up north that we never really think about or care about, but, and then they go, oh yeah, you guys are funny. Oh yeah, you're all comedians, and you have such a good sense of humor, So they don't necessarily think about our music as being much different than their own, because there is a kind of a parochial nature to the American spirit. Is kind of like, well, we look out for ourselves, we lift ourselves up by our own bootstraps. We are Americans. That's what we do, So there's not necessarily a kind of an international thing there. So yeah, depends who you're talking to, right?
I just thought it was fascinating because, anytime I get to talk with somebody from the States, you almost get a little put out if they don't know our music. And I mean, Helix is another one that sometimes comes up, but for the most part, they're I don't want to say stunned, but they just don't get our music for whatever reason. You become a little protective. But one guy, so Billy Sheen, I interviewed Billy Sheen, and he had watched the US Festival, and he's like, those guys, I thought they were just about lights in the show, and they were on it like in the afternoon, and basically said, you guys killed it. And there was a video that came out about that in a documentary. What do you remember about that show other than being very hot?
Well, I remember, I'm doing the rounds of interviews now, promoting the book, and I'm getting asked this question a lot. And then I sort of started to dig back and realized we played the night before, or the afternoon before in Florida on a ZZ Top thing in, I can't remember, Tampa or, someplace. And then we had to fly all the way across the country, grab a kind of a nap, and then get up. And fortunately, you get a time change, so that helps a little bit. And then we were on at like 4 o'clock in the afternoon in California. So there was a little bit of a kind of a jock mentality of, hey, my life is all about flying around and playing these gigs. So here's another one that's an afternoon, big, lots of bands. Just survive, just figure out how to get through this without the wheels coming off, But I do think there was one of the things I remember is that Gil and Mike were always a little bit more uptight about not being able to play with, as Billy was talking about, the lights and the show. And like Gil and Mike liked that security blanket. And I was I was a musician. I didn't really give a shit. Give me my guitar, make sure my amp is working, and I'm fine. I'll figure out a way to make it work. And in truth, I had a good day that day. Like I played well, I sang well. And so, and then here's all this video evidence from all these cameras, because that was a relative novelty at the time, that somebody was going to have 7 or 8 camera shoot of an outdoor rock show, where normally, and of course the other bands were sort of behaving in a way that, in terms of drinking and drugging, that they didn't realize, guys, there's going to be evidence of this. There's cameras rolling. Like, you might want to, just tone it down a bit in order to make it be so that you're handling what's going on. And having said that, I stayed around and I watched the Scorpions after, and they were really good. I thought they were really polished and really tight, and like all the things you'd want a rock band to be, they were. So there probably were some other good shows on that day. But we had a good one. We kind of stuck out. We were the outlier, right? We were these guys wearing white, and whatever.
But here's what's cool. So, when you mentioned in the book, Motley Crue might not have had a great day and whatever. I interviewed Tom Werman a couple weeks ago, and Tom talked about how certain singers that he recorded were never really prepared when they went in the studio. So they might have went out the night before, and then the next day they couldn't figure out why they couldn't get a vocal take. As somebody with that high register, obviously you can relate to that. Really. But how did you treat your voice as a singer? Because you're known as one of the all-time high guys in the history of Canadian music, for sure.
Yeah. Well, it was just, that was the gift that I had. That was the thing I was born with. First soprano, until they decided it's unseemly to have boys in with all the girls, so we're going to move those guys. You're going to be a tenor now. I think I did try to make sure that I was always, hydrated, and I was never a smoker. So there were things that, I could work my way around it. But, and one of the things that people don't necessarily realize is that in Triumph, Gil sang half the tunes. So every show, it was like, I'd sing one, Gil'd sing one, I'd sing one. So I always got a chance to kind of rest and marshal my resources for, as the show was going on and the songs were getting higher and higher, it was like, well, and I would put a couple of high ones near the front, and then I would have a chance to recover, like during a drum solo, which was always a good 10 minutes. I'd have a chance to sit back and relax and, have a bit of water and just kind of, and, get my pipes kind of back so that I wasn't killing myself, which is not to say that I didn't kill myself. I did, but I just always had the ability to hit those high notes. There's a guy, Randy, can't remember his last name, Randy Jackson from Zebra. And that guy, like, he's in his 60s now, and he's still singing way up there. And I'm going to be playing a gig in Sweden on New Year's, and Magic Power has gone from the key of D down to the key of A. So
I'm glad you bring that up, because some of the publications, and you've done some interviews here, and you've been appearing on Blabbermouth, and there's trends, right? Like backing tracks is one trend that they come up with all the time. And all of a sudden, this new one of, they're transposing keys down for singer's voice. It's like this new thing, right? But at some point in time, I think, Father Time, I guess, dictates that. And Rik Emmett says that that's something you got to do. Maybe it's smart business to do it.
I just think what really matters is whether or not you can still perform the song with the kind of respect that the song deserves. So I would try a different key, but if I didn't think it worked, like the reason that Magic Power works going from D to A is because D was a key that had a lot of open guitar strings anyways, a lot of cowboy chords work. But if you move it to A, you can absolutely hammer the shit out of the guitar the way Pete Townsend would approach a song, and you still got lots and lots of open strings, and it works. There's one passing chord that's a bit of a bitch, but essentially, I can really make that song still work in that key, and it's comfortable for my voice. And I went, hey, this is great. I don't think I'm doing any disservice to the song. But if I did feel that I was doing a disservice, I wouldn't do it. I would say, yeah, no, I can't do that anymore. And that song, it's not the right one for repertoire. I mean, I'm doing all this yak with you, Sean, and I don't even tour anymore. So this is only for a one-off that I'm doing in Gothenburg. If it's a bad night, it's a private show. I'm probably not gonna, it's probably not gonna make the internet. So I'm not too worried. But I don't know. I mean, and it's easy to pontificate about, keys and things, and when I'm not really out there playing 4 or 5 nights a week. And if I was, man, there would be a whole different set of rules. Like people would say, why is Rik Emmett going back to the blues? Like, why is he turning into a Mississippi blues kind of guy? I go, well, it's because that's one of the things I can still do okay. I can't really cut the Heart of the Sunrise by Yes anymore.
But you mentioned Magic Power. Hopefully you got all your SoCan royalties up to date, because they play that song here in Halifax probably 2 or 3 times a day. So
great, good, excellent. I'm happy to hear that. I mean, I have very, very fond memories of Halifax because, of course, Triumph shot a video there, and we had a real weekend there, where we had the Much Music people in town, and it was a lot of fun. The Metro Center. So, I think that there's a certain thing to Canadian radio that has, kept the band in a way. Triumph, we morphed from being a band that was a live show. You had to come and see the band live to really get it, to understand what it was about, because of its production and its lights and its special effects and lasers and whatever. But then we sort of made a transition from about 1979 to about 85. We'd really sort of become an FM AOR radio kind of band with songs that have kind of stood the test of time in that classic rock, forum. So that's been a kind of a lucky thing that, I happened to write 5 or 6 tunes that have just kind of been evergreen songs, and it's funny, I have a website forum kind of thing, and my fans will send me links and they'll go, hey, some band did a cover of Lay It on the Line, check this out. And there was a recent one where the guys that had played the Bissonette brothers, Greg and his brother, they've got a band, and they did a version of Lights Go Down. And when the lights go down, and there's a female singer playing harmonica, right? And then one of my fans posted the thing and said, harmonica in Triumph, I never would have thought of that. And I was able to post back and go, oh yeah, buddy? Well, you're forgetting that on the song Cool Down on the Thunder 7 album, your Uncle Ricky plays some harmonica on there, And it's like, and I hadn't thought about that for like 2 decades, right? But it was just like we had Eddie Kramer, the guy that had done Zeppelin and Hendrix and stuff. He was in to sort of ostensibly be the mix guy, but he helped us record the last couple of songs, and Cool Down was one of them, which was a very Zeppelin-esque kind of a tune. And he said, oh, you should play harp on there, man. Robert Plant used to play his harp all the time. I go, really? Oh, okay. I'll give it a shot. So there's a couple of Waylon notes in there.
Why not? And I was going to save this question for the next segment, but I'm going to do it now. So you mentioned Lay It on the Line. So I play in a band. We cover that. We did it Sunday night at a birthday party. So I have 6 people in the band. I don't sing, but it's 4 backup singers and a female singer in original key. And every time she does it, she goes, "How did this guy sing this song back then?" And it's amazing to think of. And I mean, I saw you guys. I was at both shows in Halifax. I've seen you guys do it live. What did it take to pull that song off live versus the studio? Or was there any difference? You just went for it.
It wasn't that hard. I mean, back in the day, that I could quite naturally, like, I think the chorus has a high F at the end of it. So for folks that are not, guitar players and stuff, that would be a note that's up above the 12th fret of the first string on a guitar. That was, in isolation, I could hit that one because it's like a throat head tone kind of a thing that I could find it. I never went that high in the rest of the song, except there were some licks, I guess, at the end that went, "Oh, hey, my time," and they were off the E, the high fifth. So, but I can't do that anymore. Like I'm telling you, Sean, you know the way Clapton took Layla and he turned it from a screaming tune in D minor to this, shuffling kind of tune acoustic and dung dung dung, and he just sang it down the octave. Lay It on the Line, I kind of do that now. All the songs that were way, way up there, they're just kind of down here now, It's like, and I got to say this, like back in the day, I saw Queen live a couple of times, and Freddie never sang the high notes that he'd sung on record. He changed melodies. He sang things with different. He was still a great singer, and what he sang with panache and style, like he was able to bring his character onto the stage. But the melodies would change, and ever since then, I've kind of felt like, yeah, like you don't necessarily have to hit the same notes that you put on the record. Now, having said that, of course, when I went to see Yes, and John Anderson was one of my favorite singers, he always hit them, and they were always like pure. And I thought, I don't know what kind of dope he's smoking, but it's working. Like I don't know what kind of granola that boy eats for breakfast, but that's working for him, So.
Well, it's hilarious because every time we do that song, everybody wants us to tank, and I mean, I'm absolutely blessed that I have, 5 amazing singers in the band, and I just get to, do the book bash drum part, but it's phenomenal. So we're going to take a break, and we're going to come back here with Mr. Rik Emmett after this. Well, welcome back to Rimshots with Sean. I'm here with the one, the only Rik Emmett. So I interviewed you a couple years ago. I don't expect you to remember, but you did 2 shows in Halifax. Do you remember another thing in Mr. Rik Emmett's life that has a significant tie to Halifax?
I can remember once being in town and going to the radio station to do an interview, and the guy from Trailer Park Boys that wore the thick glasses, he was there, and he was waiting to ambush me because he was a big fan, and then he was sort of part of the conversation on the interview on the radio station, and I went, okay, this is a first, this is cool, Why? What else am I supposed to remember? Well, I remember in my book, I talk about playing Dartmouth, being in Justin Page, and there was a bar there called the Matador,
which is a crazy horse.
Yeah. Okay. Well, and I remember that, and I remember the ladies taking us out to the beach during the day. We were there for a week, and in the summertime, and it was fantastic. So, what's your story?
You were in town when the Jays won their first World Series.
Oh, right. The Misty Moon.
I was actually in the opening band when that happened. We did our set. And I remember your crew saying, Rick's not going on because if you remember the game went in extra innings, Rick's going to go on when the game's over. And you did. Luckily, it didn't go too long. Bars packed. Everybody's watching the game. Then you went out and you just absolutely slammed it. One of the coolest memories for me ever, because it's like, do you remember where you were when? Yeah, I 100% do. So cool.
Yeah, well, me too. Like, I've always been a huge baseball fan, and Yeah, it's weird. It's like when you're on the road and you're, like something like that is happening, which is, it's more of a national, international kind of impact thing. My gig at the Misty Moon seemed to pale in comparison to what was going on. I really needed to watch that game. I really needed to see that. Now, was that the game? Was it that year that they got the last out where Otis Nixon sort of half-heartedly tried to bunt and they threw him out at first?
And Joe,
Was
yeah, and
that,
Joe
is that
Carter was like dancing around, and yeah, went in
yeah, it was
extra
like
innings.
caught the ball and was jumping and jumping and jumping like an idiot. Yeah, yeah, that was great. Yeah, I
So
think
cool.
Adam, I can't remember who the pitcher was. Timmons, something like that. Anyways,
Maybe. And I got another little connection to
yeah.
you because a good friend of mine that I met when I was there in Toronto was Marty Anderson, and your former musical director, who I still talk to. I think he's probably come down in Florida right now, but that was just a smoking band that you had back then.
Yeah, once when I left Triumph, I mean, one of the things that I wanted to do was sort of raise the game of being surrounded by players that were always going to kick my ass. And Marty was an unbelievable musician in that he had this kind of a thing, which is almost like photographic memory. Like, for example, and we'd be in an airport, and I would show him my passport, and he would look at my passport number, and then if you ask him 4 years later what my passport number is, he'd remember it. He'd know what that was. So he was like that with music too. If he heard a song once, he knew how the changes went, and like he just had this kind of like a musical photographic kind of memory. So but that could make him a bit of an ass kicker. That was, other guys in the band weren't necessarily all that happy with Marty because Marty could be, a bit of a know-it-all kind of a dude. But and Marty, he had this Midnight Hour Productions business that he ran, which was a sound and light thing, which eventually he sold to a company out of Montreal, and he's like. He retired. He made way more money out of the music business than I ever did, So he's got a house on a golf course down in Florida, and he lives close to the golf course in his house in Toronto, and he plays a lot of golf. But Marty was always a very driven guy too. Like, he was unbelievably ambitious, and he was the kind of guy that could stay up all night and then function perfectly normal the next day. And you'd go like, okay, how's that possible? Like, if I don't get my 8.5 to 9 hours, I'm in deep shit, but not Marty, man. That guy could bring it. Like, no one could do the overnight drives like Marty. He was the man.
Yeah, anything he picks up now, he's doing astrology photography and stuff like that. It's just crazy what he's doing, right?
Yeah. Well, Marty gets on his kicks, that's for sure. And then he doesn't do anything half measure. It's like, he reminds me of in The Simpsons. There was an episode where Bart says to his dad, "Oh, Dad, as a parent, you are really half-assed." And Homer says, "Aw, I want to be whole-assed." And I think of Marty, and I go, Marty was whole ass. He was just whole ass, and whatever he decided, he was going into it whole ass.
So some of the press you were doing, there was a question a couple of weeks ago. You had it very graciously about, compare Triumph and Rush and whatever, and I loved your answer. And as you do these, I guess you get asked similar questions, and the American folks, I guess, don't know as much. They're kind of following the book. But I think one of the things that we as Canadians might go, wow, we might have known it, but maybe we didn't, was that, you kind of highlighted that it was a business arrangement just as much as it was. You guys weren't like super tight, and it wasn't like, we're going to all go in this together. You really laid it out of what your intentions were when you were in that band. Are you getting anybody that's surprised by that when they read it?
I don't think so. I think there was always a kind of a, having a successful band is a weird thing, because, I mean, if you just look at the numbers, most bands are not successful.
Yeah.
Everybody knows somebody that's in a band that's just scuffling and trying to make it work. And so when Triumph first got together and then had this kind of meteoric rise through the ranks in 77, 78, it was this thing that was starting to happen. the bands on the local scene were like, why is this happening for them? But part of that was because Triumph was a band that was extremely focused and driven by Mike and Gil in a management kind of capacity, in a way and that was a really unique thing. There weren't a lot of bands that had their managers sort of getting up on stage and playing the gig with them, and like, it made it so that there was a lot of stuff that could be like shortcuts towards strategies playing out, and then I think, and there was resentment. So I think within the industry, there were people going, and I think, don't quote me on this, but I do think at one point, Ray Daniels was saying like, well, that guitar player gets up on stage with his booking agent and his manager, and that wasn't quite true, but it was a truth about the band that, there was nobody that played in a rock band that had a better understanding of radio promotion, especially in the United States, than Mike Levine. That's just a statement of fact. And obviously it worked to the band's advantage, right? So I've kind of been going so far on a tangent here that I've lost thread of where this question started. Help me, Sean. Where did it start? What did you want to know? Oh,
well, just the fact that you guys were, it wasn't like brothers in arms so much. It was a band that was serious about getting ahead. It was a business partnership.
Yeah. So that was true, and I think it was perceived in the earlier stages of the band. But once a band reaches a certain point, like once we're now in heavy rotation on radio in the United States, and RCA is selling, enough records that they're happy, then now it's a whole different game again. Now, and the business itself kept changing. So for example, 81, 82, the business started to become about how do you get rotation on MTV? Got to get in heavy rotation on MTV. That changed the nature of everything that rock bands were trying to do. So now nobody cared about whether or not you were business minded or not, or whether or not you had strategies of how, because everybody was playing the same game now of, and of course, what's starting to happen is rock bands are starting to do the hair production, and they're putting on makeup, and Motley Crue is putting on war paint, and like there was all of this kind of stuff that was trying to become sort of a visual rock star, whereas back in the day of I don't know, say Led Zeppelin, when they were first coming up, yeah, there was the whole visual rock star thing, but it was more of an attitude thing, and it was more of a, do we have the riffs that will make this happen? And riff rock was kind of starting to go out as the business changed, and in my book I talk about how in the mid '80s there was this FM radio started to change from being a thing that played album cuts, which Triumph was kind of an album cut-ish kind of band. We'd start a song soft, and then, it would kick into second gear, and then it'd kick into third gear, and then it'd have a guitar solo that was big and huge. But then by about 84, 85, radio was going, we don't want that anymore. We want heart records that are kind of like hit singles, power pop, and Ron Nevison was this guy that, producer that had delivered a lot of that for a lot of folks, I was reading a thing the other day, and I didn't realize this. Nevison had done like, the Babies album, and then Bad English. He'd done those records, and I went, man, I didn't even know that. I knew he'd done, The Who and like Quadrophenia and Zeppelin, and back in the day, and then I knew that he'd done, it's kind of out of my head now, like Michael Schenker's band and that kind of stuff. I knew that he'd done those kinds. I did not know that he'd done, like Bad English before he'd done. I'm getting a sign that says your internet connection is unstable, but I think it's you. I don't think it's me.
Well, we can hear you, so it's all good. I know you're a busy guy, but I want to just leave you with one thing. So I probably was in grade 7. Hard to believe it that 36 years old. No, I'm just kidding. But anyway, we had 92 CJCH, which was an AM station, and every night on a school night before I went to bed, I would sit there and I would listen to one Triumph song or hope that it came on. and it was a song on one of my favorite albums, "Say Goodbye," the last cut on Allied Forces.
Yeah. And that almost didn't make the album, right? Gil did not really like the idea of Triumph doing songs that were too pop oriented. And Mike Levine understood that. And of course, he was like Gil's, those guys were like this, but Mike understood that, you did need songs that could cross over. And it's a funny thing about Canadian radio that a track like that regionally might get airplay. Like that would never get airplay, say maybe out west. Like if you had lived in Alberta, you never heard that song. It never became anything. I often, as I'm doing this round of interviews, I'll get people and they'll say like, why wasn't how come you never played World of Fantasy live when you came to town? And I went, well, it only got regional airplay. There's some markets where people really liked it. It got a lot of airplay, but it was not. It certainly never had the success across the board like Lay It on the Line did, and Magic Power, and other ones. Like it just never did. So it's just a funny thing about that Halifax does have that. When I went solo and I did my Absolutely album, there was a song on there called "When a Heart Breaks" that came out as a single, and Nova Scotia was the place where it got played like it was a hit single, and it was like one of the only places on the planet Earth that did. Going, there's somebody in Nova Scotia that's a music director or a program director that loves my ass. That's great. I'm glad that that's happening at least there.
Absolutely. Look, sir, I want to thank you for doing this. It's a pleasure. Very happy that the book's out just in time for Christmas, which is fantastic. Where can people find this book, by the way?
Well, it's on ECW Press, and you can find it, obviously, all you got to do is go on Amazon and, type in Lay It on the Line memoir, or, Lay It on the Line Rik Emmett, boom, you'll have it. So, but, I mean, there's links, all over the place. I also like to encourage people, as ECW Press has trained me to do, go to your local independent bookseller store. They need your support. And if they don't have the book, ask them to order it in for you, and they'll be happy to do it, because we all need our independent booksellers, God bless them.
I love it. Thank you, sir.
Okay, Sean, take it easy.
Rik Emmett.